Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the podcast. And today I'm going to do my review of AEW's Dynamite. Starting off the evening, we go to our first match of the night. It is a Continental Classic tournament matchup. It is Jon Moxley versus Rush. I thought this was a really good match, man. Back and forth matchup between Moxley and Rush. Moxley and Rush then both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Rush hitting a power slam on Moxley in the middle of the ring. Rush then hits a pile driver on Moxley, but Moxley gets up, hits a Death Rider for a near fall. Moxley then applies a submission hold on Rush. Referee sounds for the bell, and your winner of the match is Jon Moxley. And Moxley now has a total of 9 points in the Continental Classic tournament. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is another Continental Classic tournament matchup. It is Swerve versus Mark Briscoe. Again, I thought this was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Swerve and Briscoe, but Briscoe was keeping the pace of the match. Briscoe and Swerve then both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Briscoe hitting a Death Valley driver on Swerve. Briscoe then goes for a Froggy Bow, but Swerve counters it into a roll-up for a near fall. Swerve then hits a Death Valley driver on Briscoe off the apron, and then Swerve hits a Swerve Stomp off the top rope on Briscoe, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Swerve, and Swerve now has 9 points in the Continental Classic tournament. Moving on from that, well, before we get into this match, we have Adam Page and MJF backstage. Well, first we have Renee backstage. She was trying to get an interview with MJF, but she is interrupted by Adam Page. Now, this was the first time that we've seen Adam Page since the infamous match that he had with Swerve in the Texas Death Match. So Renee was trying to get, some questions answered from Adam Page. How's he been? How's everything been going since that match? But then again, Page also told Renee that he gives all credit to Swerve. Swerve was a better man that night in their Texas Death Match, but he also said that the story between him and Swerve is far from over. So we could also get a third match, if you will, at World's End, depending on how the tournament plays out. The other thing that was interesting during this little backstage segment is that, like I said earlier, Renee was trying to get word from MJF. MJF actually interrupts Adam Page and Renee. And there was a little bit of hostility between Adam Page and MJF, a little banter back and forth, if you will, even so much so that MJF, is assuming that Adam Page is the person behind the Devil's Mask. Now, to me, I think that's kind of funny, only due to the aspect that we haven't really seen much of Page besides the storyline that he has with Swerve. And I feel like when he said that, it was kind of like MJF was kind of covering his own tracks, if you will. Because a lot of people, as of late, are assuming that MJF could be the person possibly behind the Devil's Mask. My personal opinion, I think it's Adam Cole, but again, I've been saying that for the past month now. But I just thought this was kind of interesting, man, especially how it played out into the next match. MJF's match that night was Samoa Joe. So, speaking of that match, we have MJF and Samoa Joe teaming up versus the Devil's Henchmen. Now, Joe gets into the ring, the lights start flashing in the arena. And then Joe is surrounded by the Devil's Henchmen. And then the lights go back out, and the Devil is shown on the Titantron. And then the camera goes to the backstage area, and we see MJF pretty much laid out in the back, knocked out. And next to him was a glass bottle. So it looks like someone had knocked out MJF using a glass bottle. Samoa Joe sees this. He runs to the back. And unfortunately, we don't get the match between MJF, Samoa Joe, and the Devil's Henchmen. And we also don't get an unmasking. This storyline with MJF and the Devil's Mask and everything else is probably the best storyline right now going in AEW. Now, I do think that we're going to start getting I would say small signs, but more intriguing signs on who the Devil could be leading up to, obviously, World's End. I do believe that we're going to get a face reveal, I'm hoping, of who the person is behind the Devil's Mask at World's End. It's a big pay-per-view. It takes place December 30th. At the Nassau Coliseum. I know MJF has a big match defending the AEW World Championship against Samoa Joe. So hopefully we get the reveal of the person who is behind the Devil's Mask, but still yet to be seen. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It's for the AEW Women's Championship. It is Toni Storm versus Sky Blue. I really thought this was a good match, man. Back and forth matchup between Storm and Blue, with Storm keeping the pace of the match. Sky Blue ends up hitting a she ends up attacking Toni Storm throughout this match. She ends up hitting a Code Blue for a near fall. Storm then gets up, hits a hip attack on Sky Blue, and Storm ultimately hits a roll-up on Sky Blue, pins her for the 3, and your winner of the match is Toni Storm. After the match, Toni Storm was trying to celebrate in the ring, but she is interrupted by Rio. Rio makes her return. She gets in the ring, looks like she's pointing at the AEW World Championship, and she ends up attacking Toni Storm. So it looks like the next challenger for Toni Storm's AEW Women's World Championship is going to be none other than Rio. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night is another Continental Classic Tournament matchup. It is Jay White versus Jay Lethal. I thought it was a decent match. Back and forth matchup between White and Jay Lethal. Jay White was keeping the pace of the match. Jay White and Jay Lethal were both exchanging in the middle of the ring, with Jay White ultimately hitting a roll-up on Jay Lethal. Pins him for the 3. And your winner of the match is Jay White, and he now has 6 points in the Continental Classic Tournament. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of AEW's Dynamite. It is Christian Cage defending the TNT Championship against Adam Copeland. Number one, this was a great match. Back and forth matchup between Adam Copeland and Christian Cage. Christian was trying to keep the pace of the match, with Christian hitting a frog splash on Copeland for a near fall. Copeland then gets up, hits an impaler on Cage for a near fall as well. Copeland then goes for a spear, but Christian counters it with a kill switch for a near fall. Referee is somehow taken out. Nick Wayne's mom comes down to the ring. She ends up grabbing the TNT title. She ends up hitting Copeland with the title, which allows Christian Cage to hit another kill switch on Copeland, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match and still TNT champion is Christian Cage. Hats off to Christian Cage for getting the win in this matchup. A couple things I want to say about Dynamite, man. Number one, let's talk about the main event. The main event was great. A lot of people were kind of upset about how it ended. I'm not against it, man. I mean, credit, having Nick Wayne's mom come out was a little, I wouldn't say a little much. I just think, when she came down to the ring, you kind of knew what was going to happen. Like, I felt like I already knew when she was walking down to the ring that she was going to help Christian attack Copeland. That's just the vibe I was getting. Did I think this match was going to end in a clean finish? No, because I generally think that this match there'll be another rematch, most likely at World's End. Maybe a steel cage match, maybe a ladder match for the TNT Championship. I think at this point, with, the interruptions that Copeland's had with Nick Wayne and Luchasaurus, and now Nick Wayne's mom being involved in the storyline, if I was Copeland, I would probably, hope for a steel cage match between himself and Christian Cage at World's End, keeping out, Nick Wayne and Luchasaurus, and obviously Nick Wayne's mom away from this matchup, and we get a clean finish. So I do think there will be match number 2, and I'm hoping that we get that match at World's End. The other thing I want to get into is Toni Storm. Toni Storm is doing a phenomenal job with this AEW Women's Championship, man, and I mentioned this multiple times now since she has become timeless Toni Storm. This is some of the best work Toni Storm has done throughout her entire in-ring career, in my honest opinion. I mean, the character fits, the storyline, not even the storyline, it's just how she's carrying herself as this character is just phenomenal. Having Luther as her, butler, if you will, the entrance music works, it works, the vignettes work. It's just great stuff, man. She's doing some of her best work in her entire career with this timeless Toni Storm stuff that she's got going on. Rio, I didn't know what was going on with Rio. We haven't seen Rio in a while. I don't know if she was injured. I'm assuming she was. Seeing her challenge Toni Storm for the championship is going to be intriguing. We might get that match probably most likely at AEW's next pay-per-view at World's End. I'm all for it. Especially with the women's locker room right now, there's not a lot of people in that locker room that they're really building up for the women's championship right now. And I think that's one of the things that are lacking in AEW right now is definitely storylines being built for the women's side of AEW. But I'm definitely looking forward to a future match between Toni Storm and Rio. The other thing I want to get into before I get into the MJF stuff is the Continental Classic Tournament. It's been a hell of a tournament so far. Great matches, great competitors in this tournament. But the way the tournament's coming to fruition, with Moxley beating Roosh and receiving 9 points, and Swerve also winning his match, receiving 9 points. Jay Lethal and Mark Briscoe are pretty much they're still in the tournament, but they're definitely not going to be able to win the tournament. So pretty much, for what it's worth, they're kind of fillers into this tournament. Now, I mentioned this when this tournament was announced about Jay Lethal, not so much about Mark Briscoe, but I made comments about Jay Lethal and Brody King, where I'm not against them being in the tournament, but I didn't see the reason why they were in the tournament. Now, it's a completely different situation for Brody King, because Brody King has been unstoppable, it seems like, in this tournament. Jay Lethal, though, to me, was a filler. That's just the vibe I'm getting. I just feel like he was a filler to be in this tournament. He hasn't won a single damn match, and that's the reason why he still has 0 points. So I knew it's a shame, but I felt like, when they announced all these names for this tournament, I felt like Tony Khan was going to add 1 or 2 names to be a filler in this tournament, just to kind of take, the L's, if you will, in this tournament. And unfortunately, Jay Lethal was one of those guys. So, he's still in the tournament. So was Mark Briscoe. But at the end of the day, now after Moxley has now, he has 9 points, and Swerve has 9 points, there's no possible way for Jay Lethal or Mark Briscoe to win this tournament. So it's unfortunate. And obviously, I want to get into the big elephant in the room, and that's MJF. There was a lot of stuff going on last night. Like I mentioned earlier, MJF kind of had some backstage banter, if you will, with Adam Page, which I thought was very interesting. Even so much so where MJF accused Adam Page of being the person behind the Devil's Mask. This is a great storyline, man. This storyline's been going on for quite a while now. And still, we don't have a face reveal of who this person may be. I still believe it's Adam Cole. I just think the story fits for it being Adam Cole, especially with the pay-per-view being World's End. MJF obviously being the headliner of that show, and his world's coming to an end. His world's crumbling around him, knowing that his best friend, his brochacho, was the person behind all these attacks and everything else like that, and the person behind the Devil's Mask. It just fits the whole storyline perfectly. But I will also say this, a lot of people were saying, well, maybe it's MJF being the person behind the Devil's Mask. Well, I don't think so after what happened last night, considering that he was knocked out backstage due to a beer bottle that looked like, it looked like to me that a beer bottle was a part of this attack, and someone ended up knocking out MJF, and he was laid out backstage. And Samoa Joe, leaves their match pretty much, even though the match didn't take place, to go backstage to probably check on Max to see what he was doing and how he was doing. So it just fits the storyline, man. I think Adam Cole is the person behind the Devil's Mask. I think hopefully we get small hints or more hints of who this person may be. I thought we were going to get that last night with this matchup, but the one thing I did learn is that MJF is not the person behind the Devil's Mask. That's for sure. And even in that segment backstage with Adam Page, it looks like Adam Page also has some unfinished business with Swerve. And speaking of Swerve, man, Swerve, I mentioned this multiple times, man. If you guys don't know by now, Swerve is going to be a future world champion for AEW. The body of work that he's put in, the matches that he's had, it just the entire morale, if you will, around Swerve right now is very high, and he has a lot of momentum right now, and he should. And the whole thing works, Prince Nana and the dance and the music, the entrance, it just works. And Swerve is definitely more over now than he ever has been. I truly believe in his entire career. And I do believe that Swerve will have championship gold around his waist relatively soon. I can even see Swerve being a part of the finals of the Continental Classic tournament. For sure. I know he has a matchup in the Continental Classic tournament, I believe, next week with Jon Moxley, which is going to be an absolutely crazy match. But I also believe that match between Swerve and Moxley will be the first match in the Continental Classic that will be a draw. I don't see a concrete winner coming out of that match between Moxley and Swerve. But Swerve's having a hell of a career, man. Swerve has Tony Khan has put, the rocket behind Swerve's back, man. And Swerve is just, he's doing stuff, man. I mean, Swerve, he's putting AEW on the map, to be honest with you. I'm not saying Swerve is the only person. Obviously, there's MJF, Christian Cage as well, wearing the TNT Championship. But Swerve's done some phenomenal stuff, man, in the past few months with AEW. And I look forward to what's going to happen next. Like I said, obviously, he has Jon Moxley coming up here soon in the Continental Classic tournament. And according to Paige, there's some unfinished business between himself and Swerve. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. But it was a solid Dynamite, man. I'm not going to sit here and say it was the greatest Dynamite. But I do think it was more story-driven, if you will, especially with the the Devil's Mask and the entourage and stuff like that for the Devil's Mask. Obviously, that storyline's still going. It's probably the best storyline that's going on right now in AEW. Toni Storm, again, phenomenal job defending the AEW World, Women's Championship. And again, hats off to Sky Blue too, man. Sky Blue was really coming into her own. She has new entrance music and stuff like that, a more edgier Sky Blue, and I'm all for it. I think Sky's the limit for Sky Blue. I think she has a lot of momentum as well. But Toni Storm's doing a fantastic job with that AEW Women's Championship. But like I said, man, it was a solid night. I'm not going to say it was the greatest Dynamite I've ever seen, but it damn sure was not the worst. But all in all, it was a decent show at best. But with that being said, this is my review of AEW's Dynamite. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.